Cool. So I think we're wrapping up our trip to India here. So that's a lot of fun. We both spoke at a conference yesterday.
Yeah, in
Yep.
Bangalore.
Bangalore.
Do conference.
DEWCon. It's not the Mountain DEWCon, but it's Data Engineering Weekly Conference, I think is what it's called. Yeah. So what were your thoughts on it?
I loved it. This was my first time in India, for one. And the hotel that they had it in, the Taj MG Road, I was like looking around like, oh, which hotel should I stay in? Like sometimes it's like fun to stay in the conference hotel, but like I'm so glad I stayed here. It was amazing. And like everything was super authentic. I thought the experience was awesome. And I thought the conference was, Anant was saying, he's like, oh, we did this for fun. It wasn't really like something that they had thoroughly thought about in terms of like a revenue generator or anything like that. They did it because they thought it would be fun.
Yeah. It's not like a big Databricks summit or something where there's Salt and Pepper's playing in the stadium and stuff like that, right? You know what I mean? But it's a cool conference. I hope that shout out to Anant and Ashwin for putting this together. I think it was a really cool event. It happened to coincide with when I was going to be in Dubai, so they offered to have me come here and give a talk, and that was cool. But yeah, I think we met randomly on a street in San Francisco during Databricks Summit. I think our mutual friend Adi had introduced us.
Yeah, I think it was inside the venue, actually.
Really?
Yeah, we took a selfie. Didn't we take a picture?
That might have been with the other guy with glasses. I don't know.
It was definitely you. And I was like, do you know how I know it was you? Because I was like, what's your Twitter? I was like tweeting people, and you're like, I don't have a Twitter. And then you just ran off.
That would be me then. So. That's cool.
Yeah, Dee is great.
Yeah, Dee's cool. Yeah, she's a good friend. But yeah, I mean, so DevRel. I mean, that's what you do. That's what you're about. But I've always been curious about DevRel. I've spoken with several people in DevRel, like Tim Berglund, Ryan Boyd, and so forth. I think are kind of maybe some of the OGs in the space. But I still don't know what it is.
It's funny because I actually worked with both of them. Ryan was actually the person, Ryan Boyd, who's like now the founder at Mother Duck. He's one of the founders. He was the one who got me into this space and kind of gave me the opportunity. I was managing a developer community, like a data science meetup in Philadelphia.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, that's how I got into it. And then Neo4j sponsored one of our events. And then I pinged him and I was like, hey, like my background is like mostly marketing and I have some community experience stuff. And like, I really love graphs and like, I really nerd out on graphs. And like, and I was like, I'm really interested in like working with software developers in all aspects. I'm like, can you tell me about what you do? And he gave me a breakdown of the entire landscape. He spent like an hour with me. This is before I even worked with him.
Yeah.
And then they had an opportunity open for like community stuff. And then I started doing a little bit of DevRel stuff involved with community, and I started understanding what it is. I think developer relations is, there are different kinds of definitions. So like if there's a company looking for a DevRel person, it can vary from company to company on what specifically they're looking for. But generally speaking, it focuses on 3 tiers, and that's awareness, adoption, and success for the developer community using some kind of technical product. So it could be like a developer tool, like a database or some kind of quote unquote feature, or some kind of technical product. Or it could be like, certain API endpoints for like Facebook or whatever, something like that, where you need engineers to work with people because it's like a technical side of things. So the first tier is the awareness part. So developer and like advocacy. I don't always love the word advocacy.
What's the difference between like advocacy and relations?
It's the same.
It's the same. Okay.
I personally think the term developer advocate to me sounds salesy. I think developer relations is more about like the relationship with the developer community. Like advocacy sounds like evangelism, and I just don't love that.
Yeah.
I think developer advocacy, like part of like what they're about is like being truthful to like what things are and not being salesy or like, trying to fit a square, what's that phrase?
Square peg in a round hole.
Yeah, that phrase. But the awareness thing is like really kind of making sure that the developer community or like whoever would be interested in your product knows that it exists and knows what it does. So like I'm talking about databases in this case because most of my work has been in databases. So that's like the first part. It's awareness, and there that can fall into a bunch of different areas. So like you could do conference talks, you can do webinars, you could do Twitch streams, you could do partnerships with other technology companies. You could do blog posts, you could write books, anything that like kind of gets the word out about these technologies, or sometimes like if it's a thought leadership around how to build certain things. So that's awareness, and then there's adoption, which is like how to get people started using the product. And that's sometimes like creating a sandbox or a playground or demo projects that are something that people can play with and try it out. And then like, can people easily learn how to use the product? And then success, that usually goes into more around open source products. Like if it's like a enterprise kind of software, they usually have customer support for it because people are paying for it.
Yeah.
But for the open source side, a lot of times developer advocates or developer relations people are responsible for the success of their developer community using the products.
That's interesting. So on the awareness side then, what do you find is effective? Because I see companies doing all the above. You said meetups, webinars, conferences, community, but community is an interesting one, I think, because it's there's definitely a fine line, in my opinion, between a community that serves the interests of the community and interest that serves a community that serves the interests of a vendor, for example, right? And so I've seen some vendors try and create a community, and
my God, it's so annoying.
It can be very painful because I did the same thing. I used to run meetups, started several meetups, and I would get vendors coming in trying to hawk their wares, and I would have to be very clear. It's like you're not allowed to, you can talk about what you're trying to do, the problem you're solving, but I don't want you giving a blatant sales pitch for what you're doing, right? Because it's not going to serve the interest of the community that I've built. And so, but what do you think is that fine line with growing a community without, I guess, being incredibly douchey at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of what developer advocates, because a lot of developer advocates come from an engineering background.
Yeah.
So they're not marketers. They're people who like to teach and like to share and like think about things, and they like to get into interesting dialogues about where technology is going. And that's how you organically get things into conversation. So it's like focused on like solutions and in terms of reach, it really depends on like who your audience is. But I think you have to do all of the above. Generally speaking, I think in a lot of cases it's better to be a little bit more strategic with where your product fits in. But I think that, one of my kind of pet peeves is I hear a lot of companies like everybody wants to start a community. Everybody wants to start a community.
Yeah.
But that's not what they actually want. Like they want like a Slack group and everybody's talking to each other, but like that's not necessarily realistic. Not everybody wants to be in your Slack group. Like most Slack groups built around a specific technology, is really just a support group. Like it's technical support. If you have high engagement in there, it means people are getting stuck somewhere. That's
true.
Versus like a community of practice, which is like a data engineering group or something along those lines, where like it's a little bit more like discussion focused and things like that. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely crossover, but I think sometimes the goals are a little bit great in terms of what this company.
Oh, they certainly are, right? And then I notice that sometimes like the salespeople enter the chat, and then oh my God, it gets bad.
Yeah, the other thing that's really interesting about developer communities in general is like they are very anti-marketing and anti being sold to, and I think that's why developer relations like is so critical to have if you are looking for adoption, because they're supposed to be non-biased. Like they're not supposed to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah.
If somebody tells you that they have a problem that you don't necessarily think is a good fit, as a developer relations person, you're supposed to be honest about that.
I noticed that in your talk yesterday too, because people ask you questions and you're like, technology X is great at some things, technology Y is great at other things, and I think giving people those options, it definitely boosts your credibility versus saying like, no, there's only one true way. You have to pick this product. It does everything, because all too often that's what the salesperson will tell you, right? I got a lot of friends who do sales, and it's funny when I see the salespeople. We probably know a lot of the same people, but it's like they work at one company, and obviously this is the best product in tech,
right? And
then they move to the next company. It's like, well, now this is the best product. So it's just like Like, yeah, but last week you were just saying that this was the end all be all. Now you're working for the direct competitor and you're saying that's actually better, even though you're just trash talking them the week before. So it's hilarious to watch.
Yeah, I think the honest route is usually the best. I think there's actually some research that was done. I read this in a book somewhere about how, as a sales tactic, telling somebody that this is not a good fit for them can actually make them convince themselves that it is a good fit. They're like, well, no, it is good for us. Like, if you say to them, and which I don't know, I think
that's really true, actually, because it's the the classic reverse psychology. It's the best sales tactic is always to let the customer make up their own mind about the decision, and then they can justify it themselves. So if you tell them no, then it's like they figure out every reason why they should say yes.
Right.
And so then it's their idea. You didn't have to do anything. And I'm sure, when I used to date, I'm pretty sure that was like back 200 years ago. But that same approach works really well because you're just like, yeah, I'm not that interested.
I don't think it depends on the person.
We're probably not a fit. We're probably not. But it's interesting to see but I do agree, like, that tactic works really well because there's a lot of options in this space for technologies. I would say too many, and that's maybe part of the problem is, you have to go through these machinations to cut through a lot of the noise. But there's certain good ways to do it, and there's a lot of really horrible ways to do it.
I'm definitely not a fan. I mean, I think most people are not a fan of the horrible ways to do it.
What are some of the horrible ways?
I mean, like, just being salesy, people don't want that. Like, people want, like, human and realistic, and they want you to, like, to be honest with them. It's like, if something's not a good fit, they're going to respect you more as a brand and a company than to be honest with them and say, this isn't right for you. But I was reading something, I don't remember. Sometimes I read random things, like pieces of books from all over the place. Like, but it was talking about like the sales funnel, like how somebody becomes a customer and how nowadays people do the majority of research before they even approach your company. They're 80 or 85% sold before they even talk to you.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And I think that's like a big part of like developer relations kind of work and community. If somebody knows how to like navigate community to get them to do advocacy work. That's like a big part too, because as a company, you can't say, well, we're the best. Everyone's going to be like, bye. But if you have somebody in the community saying, I use this for this, and this was better at this, and this was better at that, you're going to trust that more. And that's going to like lead you to, a decision that could be in favor of them. Yeah.
But what's the ultimate goal though? Because you say that there's the end, there's success, but it's like, what does success mean in this case?
Oh man, that's like the question for lifetime question of developer relations. It's really tough because I think in my perspective, and there's a lot of people who have different, definitions of this or like whatever they think is what's deemed successful, is that when you have a healthy and thriving adoption for an open source product, when you go to try to make a sale, it makes that easier for you. So like, for example, Pepsi. Everybody knows Pepsi. There's people who love Pepsi. Sorry if you're a Coke person.
I'm not a Coke person.
Okay, well,
are you a Pepsi person?
I'm not. I don't really drink soda, but
okay. Either way,
Jordan's a Coke person, so whatever. But like it doesn't matter, Coke or Pepsi.
Yeah.
You have a demand for that. People drink it, they love it, whatever. So when the Pepsi salesperson goes into the store to like the little bodega to sell Pepsi, that bodega owner is going to buy Pepsi. 7-Eleven is going to buy Pepsi because there is a demand for it, and I think that's ultimately the goal of what developer relations is. I think over time it has, in a lot of organizations, it's kind of shifted where they want more sales out of it. Like their expectations. So a lot of times developer relations people, when they're like looking at potential jobs, they'll look to see what department developer relations is tucked under. So is it tucked under marketing? Is it tucked under product? Is it tucked under like engineering or sales or whatever? And that usually will tell you what the metrics are of how they're going to measure your success in that. And that's not always cut and dry, but I personally think developer relations needs to be its own department. But
that's a good point, because you would be subject to the whims of whatever the incentives are for that department. And
exactly.
Yeah, and so it definitely seems like different companies have different flavors of DevRel then, right? like I see this with a lot of the bigger companies too, and I'm not going to name names, but they have developer relations, but some of these are like closed sourced products, and it's like, well, how does this work? Because ultimately you're going to have to drive sales. This isn't meant to like drive kumbaya or like karma points or something. Like it's meant to drive sales at the end of the day. So it's an interesting thing, right? I don't know. But it's always mystifying to me because when I see DevRel, and I think I'd like your take on this. Like, what is that critical mass that you have to achieve with the developer community in order for there to be, I guess, widespread adoption and I guess success at however you're going to measure it?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
I mean, the thing is with developer relations, it's really hard to measure because what you're ultimately doing is building hype. So like people know about this thing, they heard about this thing, they maybe read about it somewhere, but that lead is not necessarily captured. So like it's just really tough to measure. The best measurement, like what I deem successful, is like if somebody comes up to me and they're like, "Oh, I've heard of this." Yeah. That is a successful developer relations work. I mean, obviously it's not just DevRel on its own. There's a lot of parts that play in. Like marketing plays a huge role, and a lot of times internal individuals inside of organizations play a massive role in that awareness. Oh yeah. Even though the companies don't give them credit for it, which is like crazy to me.
What, the companies like the vendors?
Yeah, like the company
That's
that
crazy
they work
to
for,
me.
like they don't realize.
When I was running my consulting company, it was, and the dirty secret is like they use, they would partner with people like me. I wouldn't say use, but because I know a lot of people, I would be able to maybe help them get to the key person they were trying to, talk to. And I would have to be very careful about this because again, I run a community that's very unbiased, but if it felt like the vendor was, and that person was a good fit, then the match could be made. But I never tried to force it either. You know what I'm saying? Because I mean that's just not cool. But I think you're absolutely right. There's always that person in the organization that's championing a technology. Ultimately, it's how a sale gets done, or it's how open source technology gets adopted. It's usually like one or two people leading the charge, and then it spreads from there because they're the internal advocates. And it's crazy to me that companies don't recognize those people as much because that's literally who is fighting for you every day.
Yeah. I think the reason why is because they usually have different titles. They're usually like solutions engineers, field engineers. Like a lot of times these field engineers are the ones that are like speaking at events and going to meetups, and it's way beyond their job description. Like it's not in their job description to write blog posts, but they do. And they do make a huge impact, but they don't. So for one, it's not in their job description. Two, it's very difficult to measure the success, nor is anyone measuring their success. So like these field engineers are speaking at meetups and doing, blog posts or whatever, but no one is reporting back to the executive team from sales saying our field engineers did 5 meetups and this is how many attendees were there and this is blah, blah, blah. Like no one's reporting those things. But those people, like I've seen companies that lose those people, and I'm like, you made the biggest mistake. Because like you see it internally, you feel those things, like those relationships, like you see that person like out at a conference and they're talking to all the right people, like those relationships, like you can't measure that. You can't measure one of the solutions engineers or field engineers at one of the vendors building a relationship with Joe and talking to him about this stuff. And then Joe knows about it and he's thinking about it and he digs into it and he tells about his friend, and like you can't measure those things. But those things ultimately, I think, make a huge impact on companies' success.
100%. I see this every single day. But it's because it's really rare. I've seen where a company, like a customer or a prospect will look at a technology and say, "Gosh, I really like those display ads that you put on LinkedIn. Like I'm totally going to buy it now." Right? Like, that's never ever happened. And then even from posts, social media posts, I think it definitely promotes awareness. But again, I've never seen anyone say, "Gosh, I'm definitely down to buy this because of your awesome post." And it's interesting for me because I got some friends, I run in the circle of quote data influencers. I'm very reluctant to call myself one, but a lot of friends are doing sponsored posts now on behalf of companies, and it's interesting because these companies will come back to my friends and say like, this is how this campaign is doing, and they're trying to drive maybe registrations to a conference or something like that. And I think it's interesting because now, these companies are trying to clamor for attention by getting people with large followings to market on their behalf, which, you know, I mean, this happens in every industry. It happens with soda, it happens with makeup and everything else, but it's just, I do find it pretty fascinating, just the contortions, you know, companies will go through to try and build awareness, especially now when like things are a bit tighter, things are a bit tough. I actually notice there's an uptick in, you know, just promotional efforts and marketing and all this other stuff because
Yeah, it's not authentic. There's like,
Nah.
you know, even tracking things, it's hard to track somebody's,
yeah.
you know,
They
influence.
give you maybe like a UTM code you can use, you know, for your
Still, it's
influencer.
not the
Some funny-
same, you know?
Yeah.
Because, like, you could go up and talk about a technology and, like, mention something in one of your talks, and you're like, here's the code, and guess what? 2 people scan it, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
But then a bunch of other people are going to research it after the fact, and then they're going to
Yep.
see it at a conference a year later or 6 months later or whatever. And those are the times when, like, you can actually, as an organization, as a company, a vendor, when you can actually make an impact on those people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a good point because it feels like a lot of this stuff is just very transactional. It's like, you know, in the next hour, how many, you know, hits can I get off of this? But as you say, it's a very cumulative thing. Like often these are very expensive purchases, and often there's a lot of political complexity in a company to adopt new technologies. It's not just, you know, sign me up. It's like I got to convince so and so that this is a good idea, and so and so's boss, and it's
Right.
like the adoption process for technology is often riddled with a lot of, I would say, you know, hidden landmines that you know, sometimes explode on impact and you don't even know it hit you. I've seen this countless times in sales cycles where, you know, technologies are supposed to be adopted, then something happens because you didn't get the adoption of the person that, you know, you didn't convince the person that was who ultimately mattered in that conversation. You know what I'm saying? So it's much, I think, of like identifying who's going to influence, you know, that adoption, as well as understanding who's the person you don't know about. Right? It's like a movie. There's always the villain you don't see until he pops out of the shadows or something, and you're like, oh shit. So it's an interesting one. You used to be like before you were doing DevRel, you also used to do marketing for musicians. Well,
Yeah.
did that play like a big role in helping you, like, because I think you approach DevRel a lot differently than I've seen other people, but like how much did it impact? Maybe go into like what you used to do. I think it's pretty cool.
So I was in entertainment for a while. It is kind of a very non-traditional route into working in developer relations and software developers, but especially because when I worked in entertainment and music, like I knew nothing about software development. Like when someone would tell me like I'm a software developer or systems admin or whatever, I'd be like, oh, computer person. I swear to you.
Exactly, yeah.
That's how I knew people. I was like computer person, and which I think helped me further down the road, which I'll explain why. But like I did marketing for like a bunch of big artists, mostly in rap music. So like I think the kind of breaking point in the career was like when I worked with like Eminem and 50 Cent and like really big rappers. And a lot of the stuff that I did, it did build the foundation for what I do now. Because, you know, you have to build buzz and like make things cool, or like how do you get people to talk, or like in that case, like listen to things. You know, it's like part of it is like the influencer thing you were talking about. Like our job was like to get DJs to play the music in the club or on the radio or whatever, you know, and it's like, how do you get them to do that? You build those relationships and then they start playing things, you know. We did a lot of like guerrilla style campaigns. Like a lot of the stuff that I did was very organic. And I created a lot of things. Like I was doing a lot of sponsorship development. So basically, if Eminem had a concert, and he was doing an after party or something, we're like, oh, you know, vitamin water or absolute vodka or whatever. If you want to sponsor it, we'll put your banners here. We'll do this. So I'd have to figure out creative ways on how to get the brand in front of his audience.
Right.
And like, you know, T-Mobile presents this, whatever. And like, that was part of like the big stuff that I did. And then the way I got into tech is kind of a weird thing, but I started learning about software development.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with working with software developers for a lot of reasons, but it's very...
That's interesting. That's such a transition. I used to be a club DJ, but more in like house and techno. So I definitely empathize and used to promote, you know, club events and stuff. But it was just funny because one of my friends told me like, you approach whatever you do like a club promoter, and I was like, that's the weirdest thing I've heard. But he was also he used to be a rapper too, so he understood.
Really?
Yeah. So and obviously, you know, what you were trying to do is like a totally different level because you're getting DJs at probably big clubs to play, you know, Eminem's latest track that he's about to drop.
Not that
right?
hard.
It's, I guess that when you reach a certain point, every DJ is kind of like, yeah, I'll
Right,
play it, right?
exactly.
Like, you're gonna play it anyway.
Right.
So yeah, that's. But I mean, how would you identify, like, because I think there's a lot of parallels to DevRel. Like, how would you identify which DJs to go after?
I mean, we had a list. So, like, we had a list of all the big DJs and all the big radio stations, and, like, we would do emails, and then there would be
Well, like
ones.
Sway.
Yes, Sway. I mean, I used to have groups in my phone, like categories. And once I got an iPhone, it's really hard to categorize it, but Android, it's really easy. No, I'm telling you, it was crazy. So I had 400 DJs, and like they were like famous DJs, like you know, people who were like you would be like whatever, and you know, we would go through those lists, and like a lot of times it would be like an email blast, but then some people would get more of like a custom treatment. So like we'd go to see them, we'd stop by at the radio station, or we'd stop by if they're playing at a club or something like that, and hand them like a CD. It was like very kind of old school.
A CD.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's what you do back then.
We'd hand them a CD.
Yeah.
I remember there was like a USB drive at some point or something like.
Well, it's because you could play it on the CDJs.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh.
Yeah, but it's like the CDs though. It's I guess
Yeah, we gave CDs.
So I remember that I would send CDs out to labels and stuff too to, you know, get stuff signed, or send them to DJs so they'd play them out. I mean, same, you know, but it's all the same stuff.
I don't even know if they necessarily played the CDs, but I think it's like getting gifts that would be like, you know, kind of associating them. And I mean, I kind of had it easy because I got into working with Eminem when he was already famous. Like 50 Cent had just gotten signed to his label, but like he was famous already. So like a lot of it, honestly, it was just like an entryway to do anything. I was like, oh, I could just name drop. I'm like, I work with Eminem, and people are like, okay, come in or whatever, you know? Which that's the thing about music that I didn't like, is that you do have to like prove yourself. In software development, it didn't seem like that. Like everyone's welcome. You host a meetup, if you're nice and if you're smart, I mean, you don't even.
Well, the music industry is a lot more cutthroat.
Oh, it is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it makes software. I mean, software's pretty cutthroat too, but I would say it's nothing compared to the music industry, just because everything moves super fast. Mm-hmm. You know, like tracks, for example, they have an expiration date on them. Like you have to move. You know, and it's like music is just, it's constantly changing. Tech changes, but music I think changes much more quickly, and tastes change, and you know, that's why rappers, they flame out. Like a lot,
that's true.
You know,
that's the other thing about music that kind of bothered me is like I feel like I came across so many super talented people, and then they would just not make it. And like you could do all the right things, really have the right team, the right people working on your stuff, getting in the hands of the right people, they even play your music, and it just doesn't stick. And that was like, there was a lot of things there that I didn't always know why it didn't. And there was a flip side too. I remember like I organized Future. Do you know Future, the rapper? I organized his like listening party when he got signed to Def Jam.
Damn.
Okay. And I remember being like, this is awful. Like I heard him in the back just like singing with a microphone. Like, you know, a couple people came out, some press, whatever. We had some hot wings. It was nothing fancy. His like little listening party on 10th Street by the railroad in New York. And like, I remember just being like, oh, it's not that good. And then it hit after hit after hit after hit after hit. I'm like, are you kidding me? You know? So
it's interesting. But, you know, I mean, if you kind of, I mean, I think there's some parallels too to what happened with streaming, where Spotify pretty much blew the doors open, and same with YouTube, where you could definitely get by without, you could be an independent artist and go out on your own and make it. I think that changed a lot of stuff. But I think the same thing is true for a lot of, you know, software companies right now, where you don't have to go. I think there's just a lot of other ways to get attention now, where before it's like you had to go through the typical, you know, channels that go through go to the big conferences and, you know, partner with the big companies. But like my friend Chad Sanderson, for example, like I think he put the playbook together for like the perfect way to launch a company, because what he did is just, you know, blew up on LinkedIn, for example, which LinkedIn I think is one of the most underrated channels for tech. You know, publicity, but blew up there, started talking about data contracts, which is like the most boring topic in the universe if you think about it. Like literally, who cares? It's, I mean, it is. No, Chad, if you're listening, I love you, but it's like it's a boring topic. But he managed to, you know, I think build a huge audience around it, build a big Slack community of like 9,000 people or something like that, and then, you know, launched a company off of that, and it got great funding, got great everything. I think I think he made a good playbook where that was just a different way of doing stuff, right? And but it's cool to see he didn't have to rely on anybody. He just had to, I think, be slightly controversial on LinkedIn, and then the rest fell into place.
Wow.
So yeah, it's interesting.
I'm wondering if somebody replicated that exact same thing, if it would work for them. Like, I don't know if it always does. And that's
It's
the
hard
thing,
to do.
kind of going back to the music thing. Like, you could go the same avenues, follow the exact same recipe, and then it doesn't stick.
It's true. I mean, virality is a very hard thing to. I think if you try hard to make something viral, it won't work. It works precisely because it's accidental, right? And something catches on. But you get the early indications of whether or not you should probably continue. Like, you're not going to keep
that's true.
trying to make stuff viral, but you definitely have early hints. But I think it's interesting because I feel like we're definitely at a kind of a sea change right now with the, especially with the economy and how companies are trying to do DevRel and do marketing. I think we were both at Big Data London, and it felt like there were a lot of companies there. But I made a podcast about this a couple weeks ago, but I felt like there were almost too many vendors in some ways. I was like, what do they all do at the end of the day?
It was a lot.
Yeah.
There were a lot. I think it was like 100.
How do you stand out though? Because it seemed like a lot of these were the same type of company.
Yeah. No, for sure. I was thinking that. Like, I feel like the industry, to me, I don't know if we discussed this during this conference or not, but like, I feel like it's a little diluted. Like, it seems like there's a lot, and like just the nuance, small differences between each one.
Yeah.
Just seems so minimal. But I don't know. I mean, I did see some good like campaigns from some folks. So I think there's some vendors there that partnered up. So like, I think Databricks was there.
They were, yeah.
They gave away a stuffed lamb or goat or something. Okay.
Like a
little stuffed
like a toy.
Goat. Yeah.
Okay, I thought you meant not a real one. Okay.
No. Honestly, if they gave away a real lamb, I would definitely have played. But they gave away like this little stuffed goat. And everybody was giving away stuff. There's a bunch of vendors giving away stuffed animals. Most of them, you come in, you're like, I want a stuffed animal. They're like, here you go. But Databricks made you work for this little goat or whatever, sheep, I don't know what it was. And they basically gave you a card, and you had to visit 10 of their partners on the floor.
Oh, smart.
Yeah. And that was interesting because they sent you on a route. There was like maybe 12 vendors that you could choose from, and you have to see at least 8 in order to get either a goat or a t-shirt or something like that. And it worked. I went with Mark Needham, who's like my bestie.
Yeah.
You know Mark. Me and Mark's like, oh, he's got daughters. So he's like, I got to get this goat. I got to get 2 goats. I was like, all right, I'll be your second goat, man. And we had to stop at all these vendors. And it was honestly, part of it was kind of painful. Like, you have to listen to their pitch, and you're just like, oh my God, shoot.
Oh my God, it's like a timeshare meeting.
It's awful. Yes, that's exactly what it feels like.
Well, I took my kids to Big Data London.
You took your kids to Big Data London?
Uh-huh.
Really?
So they're walking around the conference hall getting swag, and it was funny because the vendors wouldn't even bother doing the sales pitch for them.
I mean, that makes
sense. My kids
sense.
10, it was perfect. They came out with so much swag. I was like, are you serious? Do you want all this stuff? I think they got the doll from Databricks too, but it was pretty hilarious. But yeah, I mean, I think I went to one booth, and it was the wrong booth. It had a similar name to the booth I was trying to get to.
Oh.
And I was like, and then all of a sudden I got sucked into a sales pitch, and I just had to sit there.
Oh, it's awful.
Oh my God, it was.
But see, like, they could improve that. Like, it shouldn't be a painful experience for you to visit a booth. You know, like, they could do something cool, something interesting, something that engages you, where you're like, wow, this is cool. And, like, that's, like, what advocates and developer relations are supposed to be doing.
Well, for sure, yeah. Because, I mean, let me give you an example of why I was bored. The pitch started out basically going through, just clicking through the menu in the app. And I'm like, I don't care about this. I don't even know what you do. Why are you going through the entire menu and showing me all the options?
Oh, my God.
Clicking through stuff. It was possibly one of the worst demos I'd seen. So, you know, and again, 5 minutes into it, I was like, I literally have no idea what this product is supposed to do. Right?
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So people out there, if you're going to do a pitch at a conference, keep it short and sweet. You should keep people, my opinion is like, and I'd love your take on this, it should be no more than 20 seconds. Tell me what you do. I don't have time, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I have a strategy for booth work.
Yeah.
And part of it is I think people should be doing live demos, like technical demos, like getting in deep dives, but like that's like more presentation in the back. I do agree with you. There needs to be like a quick and short spiel.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have like a whole thing for it, but it shouldn't feel painful. And if these companies are spending a ton of money, so like
A lot.
if it's better for you to talk to 10 people and have a good pitch rather than 100 people and have a painful pitch.
Mm-hmm. No, they'll hate you. Like, I don't like this company right now. I hate them. Just kidding. But I don't have a good impression. And so that's interesting. I mean, kind of closing out, like, I guess, what are some tactics that you've seen or strategies work in DevRel? Like, what is there a secret sauce to this, or is it like, it depends on the company, or like, how do you think about this?
Yeah, I think it depends on the company and the product, but I think there's a lot of things that like by the playbook like can work, This is kind of the same thing like the music thing where like sometimes things stick and sometimes they don't, but we don't always know why.
Yeah.
But I think, there's like standard things like writing content, blogs, and, conferences and things like that. I personally like being a little more strategic on the back end of like why you're doing certain things or what kind of content you're creating and how it's going to be useful for people. There's so many different tactics, and like I just think it's important to like utilize a little bit of everything. Even when you're talking about the digital ads, like how they don't work. I mean, I don't touch digital ads. It's not a developer relations thing. But like if you're marketing a book, that is a great digital ad.
That's true.
Because that's something that people are like, this is cool. Maybe I'll be interested in listening.
If you see it enough, you're like, yeah, I'll maybe get it. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
But I think just generally just like authenticity and showing cool stuff and like working with the community. I mean, it's a longer game. Like developer relations is not lead gen.
You're not a carnival barker.
No.
Right? Yeah.
I don't know that term.
A carnival barker, like back in the 1800s, in the especially in the Wild West, you'd have somebody, on the carriage, pulling up to a town and selling potions, and that kind of stuff, like there's, cure-alls. But in much the same way, and these are hucksters, right? These are just like classic hucksters. They're just selling bullshit. In much the same way, if a DevRel did that, and you'd be, laughed at.
Yeah,
at a minimum.
I feel bad for some DevRel people because like they work for companies that suck. Like it does. It sucks. Like, how do you do DevRel for a product that sucks? I
don't know. It's trying to polish a turd. I don't know how that works. It just.
I love that phrase.
It's true though. I mean, at a certain point, if the company sucks or the product sucks, there's not a lot you can do about it. Like I think a good product backed by a good company should be the minimum if you're going to try and take a DevRel job. And if you can't suss that out as a DevRel person, I'm not even a DevRel person, but I'm just like, if you can't figure out there's an old saying, if you can't figure out who the patsy is at the you're probably the patsy at the poker
not
table,
everybody
right?
has their choice of the
This is true though, and actually that's a good point because especially with the great reshuffling of DevRel people, it's like it's not like a lot of these jobs are advertised or sort of word of mouth. It seems so that's a good point. Yeah, sorry for being critical, everybody, but it's an interesting one. But you're off on your own doing your own thing. That's cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. It happened by accident.
Awesome.
And I'm loving it.
What's your company?
It's not like I didn't build it out to be a catchy name. And the way I know it's a terrible name is because everyone screws it up. So it's called Project Elevate. And it's been called Project Elevator by a guy that I hired, for the record. Like I hired a developer. I hire developer advocates to do like side work. He called it Project Elevator. I'm like, it's Project Elevate. And then I had my bestie, Mark, called it Project Relate. And I'm like, that was like early on, like I think he knows it now. But like, I didn't make the name to like stick out or anything, so.
My company is called Ternary Data. And I remember we were in a meeting, I can say now because it's been a while, but like Google, we were in a meeting with Google and they introduced us to a customer's Tyranny Data.
Oh.
And it was just like, you really didn't do that, did you? But you just did. So we're here to oppress you, but it was just funny. So I totally get it. It's like people will just butcher your name no matter what. And Elevate, you would think that that's like it's spelled a certain way, it's pronounced a certain way. It would be hard to screw this up. I don't know, it's funny.
I mean, Elevator, okay. But like for me, I don't really care. I think I also have like my name in general, like Karin most people butcher that too.
Well, I called you Karen at first, and
Oh,
I was
so
like,
see?
I felt bad. I was like, well, she doesn't really seem like one of those, but you know.
But that's the thing. It's like I'm so used to people butchering my name that I'm like, whatever. Project Elevate, Project Elevator.
But what do you do? Like, what?
Project
I guess what's the pitch?
It's like basically developer relations consulting. So I just it's like DevRel out of the box. And also I do like a lot of community stuff. So like I can build out community programs. I think a lot of people want community. Like I kind of dig down into like what it is that they actually are looking for and figure out how to build programs to accomplish those goals
That's super cool.
using the developer ecosystem.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I think I think you're gonna do really well.
Thanks.
So, yeah.
I appreciate that. It's new and it was an accident. And
Yeah.
I'm really fortunate to have Jordan, my boyfriend, because he's helped me like build it out. Like he's like, oh, you want to start consulting? Okay, here's a lawyer and here's like a domain for you and here's like I got my company registered.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it helped a lot. I don't think I probably wouldn't have done it if it wasn't.
Well, starting a business is daunting. Once you do enough of it, it's like but it's still like it's just an ungodly amount of work.
Yeah.
So that's super cool.
Yeah. So, but thanks for having me.
Anytime. Yeah. Well, I guess let's go get some breakfast.
Yes,
So, yeah.
breakfast.
All right.
Bye.